Hey, welcome back everyone. It is now May 20th of 2020, and ever since the release of Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, a lot of fans have been very intrigued about the future of the Star Wars franchise by Disney and Lucasfilm, and exactly how both Bob Iger and Bob Chapek are really going to propel fans into a new era of Star Wars. This is Mike Zeroh. Make sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel for future Star Wars content. Now, the thing about Disney Star Wars is that we do know that as of this point right now, they are in a phase of damage control, or a phase of desperation, if you will, in order to essentially save the franchise and to really make it become more successful than ever before. After all, that's what Bob Chapek wants to do. He wants to create his own legacy of Star Wars, if you will. He wants to create his own legacy also with Marvel, which is very ambitious of Chapek to do. You know, let's not forget that Bob Iger is only, as the CEO temporarily speaking, helping out with the current CEO, Bob Chapek, by getting us through this crisis and also showing him the ropes to becoming a proper CEO once Bob Iger is completely out of the picture for good once and for all in 2021. Now, as far as what we could see, Bob Chapek has been doing an excellent job so far. A lot of changes have been made to how Star Wars will be handled moving on forward, and that includes a lot of fan service, retcons, and other aspects like bringing back other elements of the Star Wars franchise before Disney took over Lucasfilm. So, the one thing here is we want to actually examine the end of one thing and the start of something new with Star Wars. Essentially, it is the end of how Disney is treating Star Wars and how they treated the sequels and the other projects that we have seen, and how they're going to be handling new projects in the future. So, first of all, Kathleen Kennedy's creativity, pretty much her creative control being stripped away by Bob Chapek, was the first step of really making all of this happen. And if you really think about it in this sense, Kathleen Kennedy, like I've always said before in the past, was always an incompetent leader. I would say that probably the only successful Star Wars project that she was even attached to was Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. There's no doubt about it that Rogue One felt like a direct sequel to Star Wars A New Hope, and that wasn't necessarily all because of Kennedy. Let's not forget about this, that Kennedy was the one responsible for not wanting a lot of Vader in that movie than originally intended. Gareth Edwards, alright, in case you guys did not know, originally wanted Vader to become a whole lot more prominent in the movie than, of course, in comparison to what Kathleen Kennedy wanted for Vader. She wanted Vader to only be used sparingly, if you will. So Kathleen Kennedy's creativity being stripped away, I think, was a necessary jump by Disney's Bob Chapek and even Bob Iger now that he's in the mix, including how he was the one who came up with the plan for the Rian Johnson trilogy to be split apart into 3 different projects. So let's not forget about that. So that was another big story, right? A lot of fans were always wondering what in the world was going on with the Rian Johnson trilogy. After all, Rian Johnson, as of right now, is focusing on his Knives Out universe. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Rian Johnson is actually aimed to create his own murder mystery universe. Kind of like how we've got the Monsterverse, which is the Godzilla franchise, that of course is being made as we speak, with Godzilla vs. Kong being the latest project. We've got the Conjuring universe, which is a universe of horror films. We've got the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We got the Star Wars universe, and Rian Johnson wants to make his own, a murder mystery universe. It's exactly why he's working on Knives Out 2, and even has early plans for a Knives Out 3. Hence, another reason as to why the trilogy seems, to be pretty much detached from any form of development by Disney and Lucasfilm. A lot of that had to do with Bob Chapek stepping in and really dividing those 3 movies into separate projects. Now, whether or not Rian Johnson will be attached to any of those projects in any way, shape, or form, that's another story. After all, Leslie Headland is actually in the talks with Rian Johnson to step on board for her all-female-led Star Wars TV series for Disney+. Now, the great thing about this big change, the start of something new with Star Wars, is the return of Star Wars Legends. Star Wars Legends, thankfully, is coming back, and a lot of it is going to either come back accurately, or will be coming back in a different style. A great example of this is, of course, the return of some new Skywalkers. Both Disney and Lucasfilm have plans in place to bring in characters that are going under the dubbed names of Kira Skywalker and Zane Skywalker, considered to be the son and daughter of Rey, both loosely based off of Jaina Solo and Cade Skywalker as far as the personality and the actual design of the characters go, right? So that's another great step, is the fact that they are in fact going to continue the Skywalker bloodline, the Skywalker saga in different ways in this new universe, whether it be in books, novels, comics, or even, of course, video games and TV shows. As for the movies, so far, it's completely out of the question. They're focusing on other formats to continue the Skywalker saga. Kathleen Kennedy really wanted to close the book on that, and she pretty much did the damage to that. Whether or not that can really be undone all depends on how the future really rolls out. So the other thing that I really actually want to touch on here is, of course, the changing of the tone of Star Wars. This is going to be a big deal between George Lucas, Dave Filoni, and Jon Favreau, as I like to call them, LFF or FFL. You know, the big trio, George, John, and Dave, working on this new EU that is actually going to be far larger than the old one that we got back in the 1990s and the early 2000s. You know, Dave Filoni bringing in, of course, live-action characters like Ahsoka, Tano, you know, and we've got other characters coming into the mix that were actually attached to the original trilogy, like Boba Fett coming back to life, or being proven that he never really died at all. He's working with Jon Favreau on exactly how that will be done in The Mandalorian Season 2, Season 3, and so on and so forth. You know, Jon Favreau's going to be doing some amazing things with the Star Wars universe, and I think that's one thing that is the big reason as to why Bob Iger said he sees a lot of George Lucas when he looks into Jon Favreau. He sees a lot of George within him. And that's because Jon is a very passionate creator. He knows what he's doing. You see the passion in The Mandalorian. Unlike with The Last Jedi by Rian Johnson, you don't necessarily see the passion there with Star Wars. You more so see an attempt by a, at the time, independent filmmaker kind of giving his best shot at what Star Wars should be in his mind. Meanwhile, Jon Favreau is essentially just relying on the lore and creating new lore and making a very well-written story and taking time into character development. So the other couple of things that I do want to go over here real quick for you is that, you know, obviously the retcons are going to be a big part of this new EU. This is yet again another plan of the start of something new with Star Wars and leaving the old behind. And I think that's a really good thing. This really does spell a light at the end of the tunnel here because of Kathleen Kennedy's leadership being diminished and how they actually plan to have Jon Favreau take over as head of Lucasfilm. He's actually one of the top candidates by Bob Iger and Bob Chapek in order to lead Lucasfilm and to actually lead all of Star Wars and exactly how it really should be handled. And when you think about it in this sense, right, Star Wars has seen this steady decline, if you will, ever since the release of The Last Jedi. We've seen a steady decline. I would say that once Rogue One, A Star Wars Story hit, Star Wars was really at its peak because the trilogy wasn't necessarily, you know, getting closer to wrapping up at the time. The possibilities were still open as far as what the future solo films were going to look like, and of course what the rest of the trilogy was going to look like. So 2016 was a great year for Star Wars, I think, because you see 2016, you see the audience thinking exactly what Star Wars could have been, you know, from that point in time all the way till this year of 2020 and beyond. So now that we've seen this complete, you know, a reset of Star Wars, how Disney's going to handle things, you know, the start of, you know, pretty much the start of something new and the end of the old is really a good scenario by Bob Chapek, and it's really going to essentially restructure the Star Wars brand. I think one thing that a lot of fans seem to be a little bit worried about is how Kevin Feige, alright, the Marvel Cinematic Universe producer, and of course president, if you will, is going to be handling the backbone of the structuring of this new universe. And that's one thing that I think is pretty much, you know, I guess you could say, understandable as to why some fans would really have an issue with that, because we've seen some of the different directions of where they're going with Marvel for movies and television. Thankfully, that too is going to be straightened out by Bob Chapek, so don't worry about that. You guys probably know exactly what I'm talking about. So with that being said, guys, you know, like I've said before in the past, everything is really coming into place here, and I just really wanted to go over, you know, the end of one thing and the start of something new with Star Wars, and that there really is something more to look forward to with all the projects that are being developed as of right now. So with that being said, guys, you know, drop a comment below. Let me know think about all of this in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, do make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Gun in hand, we are alone again. No, I'm not the one from night to moon.